Well, good morning and welcome to Hang Out with Coach Kerry. My name's Kerry Brown and I am a business coach. And let me ask you this question. Have you ever been stumped with how to create a compelling elevator speech? Do your palms get sweaty? Do you worry about what you're going to say when you go to a networking event? Because one of the things that we have talked about on our previous episodes is that networking is an important marketing strategy. Very important. So we've got a marketing strategy. So how do you go about making it a successful one? Well, on today's episode, we're going to talk about how to create a compelling elevator speech. I'm a seasoned coach. I've been coaching entrepreneurs and small business owners just like you for over 16 years now, and it's my mission to be able to support you in being successful in your business. So my hope is that by the end of today, you will have a formula that will help you create that compelling elevator speech. And with me today, I have two of my Academy members with me to ask me some questions and to get some coaching. And what I'd like to do is introduce them, and then later on they're going to ask me those questions. So first of all, I'm going to go to Bonnie Mitchell. Bonnie, tell us a little bit about you, where you hail from, and how people can find you.
Hi, Kerry. Great to be here as always. I am Bonnie Mitchell. I own Mitchell Creative, and I help businesses visually communicate their expertise and services to people with whom they wish to do business. So I do this by creating a complement of marketing materials that they will need in order to run their businesses successfully.
Great, excellent. And how can they find you to find out more about what you do, Bonnie?
They can find me at bonniemitchell.ca.
Great, excellent, good. And now over to Kathy Scott. Kathy, tell us about you.
Good morning, Kerry and Bonnie. My name is Kathy Scott. I have a business called Niche Travel, and I specialize in unique women's tours all over the world, small boutique tours that are very inspiring and wonderful to be on. And you can find me at nichetravel.ca or nichewomenstours.ca.
Perfect. That's great. Good. Well, I'm excited about today's episode because it has been one that I say consistently shows up in my coaching sessions with my clients. Whenever I've done group masterminds, it's also a very common one that we deal with as well. So obviously, a lot of you tend to struggle with this whole notion of how to create a compelling elevator speech. And one of the things I want to sort of preface with this is that when you go out networking, and we covered this actually in an episode where we talked about networking strategies, but one of the key things about using networking strategies as a way to grow your business is that it's really relationship building, first and foremost. So if you've challenged yourself that you're going to a networking event and you've set it up that you've got that your goal is to meet a couple of new people that are there, that should be really the intention of going to that event, is to start building those relationships, to continually add to those list of people that know, like, and trust you. Well, how is that going to happen? It's going to happen first and foremost with you having a conversation with them, getting to know them, starting to build that relationship. You know, networking events are not the main event. They're only the process in getting to the main event, which is obviously to get them as a client or a customer of yours. So this is the relationship building first step along the way. That's really, really important. So I want you to remember that and keep that in mind, that the goal is not to go to an event and show up with a new client. The goal is to absolutely build that network of people that you know, those relationships. So you will see people there that you already know, and you want to continue to develop and encourage those relationships. Book opportunities to be able to go and meet them for coffee, have lunch, go to their place of business, find out about them. You know, there's the compelling elevator speech is one piece in a whole strategy. It's the pre, it's the during, and it's the post. And those things have to all work together. If you go to a networking event and you have a great conversation with someone and you never get around to phoning them, that was a waste of time. And I hope you know that. So having a system in place that ensures that you follow up the next day, that you know exactly how you're going to follow up with them, that you know because of the kind of conversation you had, what was the next step. So really make sure that those pieces are all in place, because it really won't matter a bit what you say when you're talking to them if you don't have those other things in place. Would you guys both agree? Say yes if you do.
For sure.
Yeah. And I would say that I'm going to do a little confession here, and I'm going to ask my panelists to do exactly the same thing, is that years ago, I used to go to networking events all excited, got my best clothes on, got my big stack of business cards, and I'd head out to that event and I'd get a bunch of business cards. And maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month later, that stack of business cards would still be sitting exactly where it was that I'd collected from people on my desk that I'd never done with anything with them. Say yes if you confess that to be true to you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So remember, the compelling elevator speech is one piece within a whole system of what it's going of how you're going to be able to use networking effectively as a marketing strategy. So I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie, my first question here. What, Bonnie, would you like to know about how to create a compelling elevator speech?
Well, as a designer, I've definitely found that networking has been one of the best ways for me to get business, because most of my business is through word of mouth and referrals. So often what happens when I go into a networking event is it's great, you walk into this room full of people, but sometimes it can be a little difficult to get that initial conversation started. So my question is, when you're at a networking event, what is the best way to start that conversation?
Great question, Bonnie. And I know exactly what you mean, especially if they're already little sort of pods of people who are talking. So remember, you're there to create an impression on them. And how you create an impression on them is making it about them, not about you. In other words, it's more important for you to be impressed with them than to have them be impressed by you. So your first thing would be an opening line, which would be, let's say there's a group of people who are talking, and you want to, you'd love to be part of that. You walk and you say, hey, may I join your group? Now, some of these things might seem so self-evident, but because we get all our bodies in a knot thinking of how we're going to do it and how we're going to, get into that group, start with something really simple. Hey, may I join this group? I'd love to get to know you guys. So once you've done that and you're in that little group, your very first question is to ask them about them, not about you. So your first question would be something, so tell me, Bonnie, what it is that you do. And a really key piece in this is to actually listen and to say it like you mean it. Because it's really important that you're not running your elevator speech or what you're going to say and getting ready for that moment to pounce going on in your head. Because would you both agree that if that's going on, they know it?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely they do. So most important is you are there to engage them in conversation. So you're going to ask them about what they do. Now here's a clue, I think, pretty self-evident. If you ask someone what they do, and they go on and on and on and on and on, and they never stop and ask you what you do, you thank them for your time and you move on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That makes total sense.
Okay, so there's two pieces of what I just said. The first piece is, if they haven't engaged and asked you what you do, are they really your ideal client or customer anyway? Probably not. Because you really, most of us want to deal with people that are engaging and curious, and it's not just all about them. And the second thing is, can you remember how you felt when that person went on and on and on, and in fact started pitching you maybe on what they could do for you? Do you remember how you felt?
Oh yeah.
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 Yeah. So Bonnie, can you put a descriptor around what that feeling was when you were sort of listening to somebody going on and sort of pitching?
Well, I'll put a Bonnieism on it. It felt oogie. It did not feel good at all.
Okay, great. And how about you, Kathy?
Well, I was going to say icky.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna throw out that it's probably because you felt like you were being pitched, and that it had nothing to do with you, and it had everything to do about them. And what's the first tenet of networking? It's to build relationship. And if a person, all they're doing is talking about them, how much relationship is actually being built? Not very much. So your first thing is you're going to find a way to get into the group, and just be bold about it and say, hey, may I join your group? Remember, they're there to meet new people. So are they going to say, no, you're not allowed to come into this group? Of course not. They're going to be happy they have somebody new to talk to, because chances are they're talking to their friends and people that they already know. Because most of us, that's exactly what happens. So they're happy to meet somebody new. So that we've covered that one off. Then the next thing is you're going to ask them questions about themselves, what they do. And, one of two things is going to happen. They're either going to tell a little bit about themselves and they're going to turn around and ask you, or, you may be asking them some questions, so some dialogue, and you're getting a sense. This is when you want to listen to that intuition, kind of that vibe. What's that? Is it a positive vibe? Are you kind of matching vibrations there? And if you are, then there's a good match for you to continue that conversation. If they're going on and on and on and on about what they do and how they can help you and all this kind of thing, then, at a certain point you're going to thank them very much and you're going to move on and you're going to find someone else. Because remember, this is just the initial relationship building piece. So great question. Thanks, Bonnie. Kathy, how about you? What's your question for me today?
Well, so we're now in the networking, and I do, as you know, a number of different networking events. It's really how I build my business, and so I'm in there and I get the question, "What do you do?" I've actually had somebody who's interested. There we go. So how do you get that first line that's compelling enough for them to want to hear more?
Great question. And I have a little trick, and it's a little formula. So you can pull this formula out on the fly, or you can prepare it ahead of time. And the reason I like it as a on-the-fly formula as well is because sometimes if you were to create your elevator speeches ahead of time, and it's targeted, and you create it with that specific audience or networking group in mind, and then you find yourself somewhere else, and it's a very different group, how do you take that elevator speech that you've created and convert it to those people? So here's the formula, and you're going to start out with this question. And so rather than saying, well, here's what I do, what you do is you're going to pause for a moment as if you're thinking about the question, because in fact if you're doing it on the fly, you are thinking about it in that moment, and that's okay. Because remember, you're having a conversation. This isn't a recorded video. It's not a commercial. This is a conversation you're having with someone. So your question would go something like this. Well, do you know how ... Well, do you know how ... And that's how you open the conversation. And so how you would ask that question is, in thinking about it, you know, and you've done the work to determine who your ideal client is. You know who your ideal client is in terms of what are the issues and problems and challenges that they might have, or what maybe even those things, those aspirations that they have. You flush that out, and we'll be dealing with a lot more of this on upcoming episodes as well. If maybe you're struggling with some of that. That's really the first step in this, is that you want to, before you go to a networking event, you need to know who you're networking to, who is your ideal client. So once you flush that out, who is your ideal client, what do they want, what are the challenges and problems they have, you can easily add the end to the end of that sentence. So do you know how a lot of small business owners really struggle with getting their message out about what services and products they offer, certainly in terms of their brand image? So there's an example for you, Bonnie.
Excellent.
Kathy, yours might be, well, do you know how there's a lot of women today who really love to travel, but either they're single and they really don't want to go and travel either on their own or in a group of people that they don't know, or maybe they have a partner, but their partner doesn't like to travel. So those were two just off the top of my head using this formula. So in the first example with Bonnie's, what I identified was her clients were small business owners who were struggling. See, there's a little bit of a problem there. They were struggling in getting that consistent brand image out there in the marketplace. And again, you could even flush that out even more. So you could say that they struggle getting their message out in the marketplace and being consistent, and as a result, they don't end up they struggle with enough clients. And Kathy, you could embellish yours more about the safety and security of women wanting to be able to travel, or the frustrations of having to plan out a trip all on your own, and all of those kinds of things. And again, you know your business, so you open it up with, well, do you know how? And here's what I'm going to suggest that you do if you're preparing this ahead of time, which is really good homework for you to get that muscle going, so that when you have to do it on the fly, you know it, is ask a question that to your ideal client, the answer would be yes in their head, even if they don't say it out loud, that they actually do kind of understand that. So you want it to resonate with your ideal client. Remember, what you're doing with this is you're actually sifting through all the people in that event and finding out those people who are your ideal client, because unfortunately they don't have an orange cone on their head and they're not saying pick me, pick me. You have to find them. So you ask that opening question for them to sort of be sensing, okay, I get this. Now I know kind of who you deal with, who is that ideal client. And then the second piece of that is, so once you've said that, you let that kind of land. Don't be too quick to rush through it. You're going to let that land, and then you're going to say, well, what I do is. And what you're going to do is then add on that what product or service that you offer. So for Bonnie, yours would be along with, well, what I do is I help clients really narrow in on where their focus is and what message they want to put in the marketplace that will have their phone ringing or get them the clients they need. Something along that line. And you could even do it a little bit, you could expand it even more. Well, what I do as a graphic designer is I do this type of thing. And Kathy, yours, you could be talking about the fact as well, what I do is I create small boutique tours to incredible locations in the world that women, just like I mentioned, get a chance to travel, so they're not, they're not frustrated sitting at home. And again, I made those up totally off the top of my head because I know the formula. So what's the first opening line? How do you open up a question, panelists?
Do you know how?
Great. Do you know how? And then once you've let that land, Kathy, I'll let you answer the second part. How do you respond? How do you follow that up with? What do you do? Sorry, what do you say?
Well, what I do is.
Correct. That's it. That's it. And that's such a simple formula, because even in the, well, what I do is piece, you can say, well, what I do is such and such. In fact, this week, I helped a client with that specific thing. So you can even use a little case study. Or you could even say, in fact, I just got off the phone before I came here with a woman who was just looking for that type of thing. And what she did is she booked my tour to Myanmar. So can you see how that's a really easy way to have that formula in your head ready to go at any given time?
I love it.
Yep, very easy.
Great. Good, good. Okay, so who's got another question for me then?
Well, I do.
Okay,
go ahead, Bonnie.
Okay. No. Oh, okay. I will go. I don't know if there's actually an answer to this question, but one thing I run into is that I'm going back. This takes me back to that statement you had said about you walk into a networking event and you see all these people in their little pods talking to each other. Is there any way to know whether you should maybe approach a group of people or not? Or when you go into a networking event, do you just expect that you should be able to talk to anyone in that room?
Great question, Bonnie. And yes, in fact, people are there because they're looking to build relationships. So assume automatically that people want to meet other people. And remember, if you're going to give them an opportunity to talk about them, they're going to like you. Absolutely. So walk up with the absolute expectation, the assumption, and the posture that they're there because they want to meet new people just like you. They maybe 2 or 3 minutes ago were looking for a pod to go and talk to and had to find a way to get into and talk to, so they can empathize with you. Everybody in that room is in exactly the same shoes. So be a host at those kinds of events. If you see someone who's walking around and is looking for someone to talk to, invite them in. What's that going to do in terms of your relationship with that person?
It's definitely going to help cement it. Yeah.
Absolutely. They're going to see that you're a likable person and that you care about other people other than just maybe what you're trying to say. So always be on the lookout for those people to invite them in as well. Great.
Okay.
Great. Thanks.
Kathy,
how about for you?
Well, it's similar to the question that I sort of have had rattling around in my brain, is that so you're there in a networking function. Is there a quick question or an opening line that you can use to really tell if they are a prospect?
Great question. And really, there's the only way you will know if there's a prospect if you start having that conversation with them, and if they're engaging in your conversation. Now remember, this is not even really the first date. It's the idea: do you want to have a date? So this is how to start figuring that out. In other words, there's no way. So maybe a piece to add to this is that there is no elevator speech on this earth that I'm aware of that can turn a non-prospect into a prospect. What I mean by that is that that person doesn't have a problem, doesn't need whatever you have, you are not going to be able to turn them into a prospect. What you want to do is you're looking to create relationships with people that maybe if they don't even necessarily, if you build that relationship with them over time, they might become a raving fan or an advocate of yours. So when you start talking to somebody, you have to understand that they may be coming from a different place. They may not be in a situation that deals with that particular problem that you've got. And so they might not engage quite as much. So they might not be a prospect, but you still want to build that relationship. So to answer your question, Kathy, is the only way you'll really know is by you asking them what they do. Hopefully, if they're polite, then they ask you what you do, and watch their response when you ask that question. They're going, yeah, or boy, I've had that, or I can see how there's, that's an issue that a lot of people have. Then you have a reason to continue that conversation. And then when you say, well, what I do is, if they start asking you some more questions, if there's a little bit of an engagement there, then that's a clue at least they're curious. And then the next step would be for you to say, I'd love to continue this conversation, find out more about what kind of, travel plans you have and everything else. May I have your card? So the other follow-up piece of this is you always ask for someone's card. And the purpose is that you say, because I'd love to, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to run by you, or, you jog my memory about something, there's something I'd like to share with you, or remember, you can ask for their card because they want to give you their card, right? So you can ask for it. You might say, I'd like to keep your card because you never know who I might meet, or there might even be somebody in my Rolodex that I need to connect you with. So you're going to get their card. And then that's the start of the conversation. Because remember, the whole purpose of networking is to build relationship. As I like to say, create some love. And who doesn't want some more love these days? So what we're looking for is that opportunity to build that relationship, to make that connection. And then you'll sense pretty quickly, Kathy, if they don't respond or react to you, that they're not. Because you cannot turn someone into a prospect who's not a prospect. So what you're in is you're in that that position of trying to sift through all the people that are there. That makes sense?
Makes total sense. Thanks, Kerry.
Okay, great. Any last quick question? We're almost at our time here, but any last quick question, or we cover it off pretty good today?
That's great.
Okay, so let's review then. Bonnie, I'll have you repeat what the opening question is, and Kathy, I'll have you repeat what the second piece of this formula is, so that people can go out today and use this at their networking events. So Bonnie, how do they open it up?
Do you know how?
Great. Kathy?
Well, what I do is.
And there's the formula. It's that simple. So my challenge is to you is go and find some places to go and use it and practice it. Create it absolutely for the first few times by writing it out ahead of time so that you're not kind of stumbling over it. But once you've got this formula in your head, you will be able to, on the fly, be able to change it. Because for some of you, you might have a couple of different niches. You might have one audience here and one audience here. And depending upon what event you're at, you might tailor it just a little bit to what their needs are, what things are a little different. So you use this formula and you'll be able to pull it out at any given time. So remember, our Hangouts are 9 a.m. Pacific time. Hangout with Coach Kerry, and you can find me at hangoutwithcoachkerry.com, spelled Kerry, where you will see all of the past episodes that are there, so you can watch all of them. Please comment and let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what other things you'd like to see or like to hear on my Hangout show, so that I can be of service to you. Next week's episode is going to be on how to create an endless stream of referrals. Who wouldn't like to have their business built 100% on referrals?
That sounds wonderful.
Great. Then tune in next week, 9 a.m. Pacific, and I will talk to you then. Take care, everybody, and have an awesome week. Go out there and practice that elevator speech.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you, Kerry.
Bye-bye, everyone.